Welcome to Good Game Pocket Edition, your weekly roundup of gaming goodness. I'm Hex.
And I'm Bajo, and this week we spend a lot of time sneaking about in the reboot of Thief.
So how much did you steal?
It's not how much you steal. It's what you steal.
But before all that, let's take a look at one of the games we reviewed over on Spawn Point, Dragon Ball Z Battle of Z. This is the latest in the long-running series of brawlers inspired by the anime show. The hair is as spiky as ever, the fireballs are just as ludicrously large, but it's all feeling a bit familiar. The character roster now boasts an impressive 70 brawlers, but a lot of the supporting cast feel like cheap imitations of the main cast.
These games have always nailed the look of anime, but the combat continually lets them down. Just hammering the melee button, then uploading a key blast is enough to get you through most fights. It's just so repetitive, especially the Cell Saga.
I also had a lot of trouble even following the action in some of the larger fights. When a handful of characters are all flying, dashing and blasting each other, the camera really struggles to follow your character on screen. I only gave it a 4. Hopefully they really overhaul this franchise next year.
Yeah, it is feeling a bit tired. It's not aging well at all. I gave it 5.5 out of 10 rubber chickens. Next up, Strike Vector.
This multiplayer space combat game sees you darting around a range of gritty sci-fi locations in high-tech fighter jets called vectors. The maps have been cleverly designed with lots of tight tunnels for these nimble jets to scrape through. And there's a dizzying range of plasma rifles, chain guns, and various perks and upgrades to coax some strategy out of you as well. There is a pretty steep learning curve to it though, isn't there?
Yeah, I think I blinked and missed that whole training section. It was just a handful of slides, and there's no single-player mode either. Luckily, the craft's handling is just so responsive. I felt like an ace pilot pretty quickly. Jetting into a tunnel and then hitting the hover button was the perfect way to lay ambushes.
Yeah, I think they just nailed the look and the speed of these battles. Hurtling around these structures during dogfights really got my heart pumping. I just wish I could have stayed alive a little longer.
Yes, my kill-death ratio is shameful, but I was laughing all the way through. My only real gripe with this game is that there's no one playing it, well not many at least. Often there were only a couple of dozen other people playing worldwide, making for some pretty laggy matches.
Yeah, I really hope this game catches on because I think the action is so well crafted. I gave it 7.5.
Ignoring the lag, I gave it 8. Now Hex, shall we barrel roll over to the Ask Good Game desk?
Yes, let's. I'm not doing that. Oh, alright.
Alright Hex, what questions await us today?
Well, how about this one from Barry, who is in Blackheath, New South Wales. Hi guys, I'm looking for good quality indie games for the Xbox 360. Got any suggestions? As an artist/sci-fi writer, I'm interested in the unusual, arty, quaint, weird, or just plain different kind of game. Or not game. Other info, I've been a fan of Halo for years, always admired their story treatment, excellent world creation. Big fan of Ian Banks' culture sci-fi novels, a tragedy that he died recently. Love Miyazaki's animations, etc, etc.
I'm a massive fan of Ian M. Banks' sci-fi books as well, Barry. I've read all of his books and very sad we've lost such a fine, hard sci-fi writer. When I think of weird and different XBLA games, the Xenoclash games come straight to mind. They're strange first-person fighting experiences with a pretty unique look and feel. As for arty and quaint, well, of course, there's Braid, Fez, and Limbo, all providing a bit of quality platforming.
There's also the HD re-releases of Jet Set Radio and Rez, which aren't strictly indie games, but they're definitely arty and different. Also, when I think of Miyazaki's animations and games, Cinemora comes to mind as very reminiscent of Porco Rosso. In fact, I'm pretty sure one of the key animators from Miyazaki's films worked on that game.
To be honest, while there are heaps of arcade games on XBLA, I think the PS3 has the edge over the 360 when it comes to more interesting and different types of experiences. Stuff like Journey, Flower, Unfinished Swan, Thomas Was Alone are all pretty unique experiences.
I was sure you were going to say that PC was the space for those kinds of games.
Well, I was just getting to that, in fact, Hex, because yes, the PC is really the home of the indie, weird and wonderful and experimental. In fact, you can get Thomas Was Alone there too. But there's also stuff like the Stanley Parable, Gone Home, and even the Walk 'em Up Dear Esther, which I hated. At least it was still different.
There's also a fairly new one called Niasensi, I
Niasensi.
think it's called. I think we should probably put that name up on the screen. Thank you, Mr. Editor Man. But that might be up your alley, Barry. It's a bit of a walking simulator with a mysterious sci-fi vibe. It almost has a bit of a feeling of maybe exploring Forerunner structures from Halo. It just definitely falls into that not quite game category at least.
But of course, if you like Ian Banks, then you definitely need to play all of the Mass Effect series. They're not quite indie, but they are incredible. I think that's a few suggestions, so why don't we move on to your review? And speaking of quirky PC games, how about we see what people thought of last year's immigration simulation, Papers, Please?
A fine choice, and as usual, there's quite a mix of opinions here. Starting off with those in the middle-ish, I guess. We've got Ice Lord 292, who had this to say: "Not a bad game, just different, lol, 6 stars.
Likewise, Audi E-Tron wasn't particularly impressed, saying, "It is a very unique game, but I didn't find it particularly interesting and a bit of a grind, 5.5 stars.
Slipping down into a bit of hate was Otago Flames HD, who wrote, "Grrr, so many papers, 3 stars.
But mostly people seem to like it, such as Taco Guy, who clearly found the paper cleaning more enjoyable, writing, "Must tidy paper, 10 stars.
Likewise, the president had some high but succinct praise and wrote, "Simulation of 2013, 10 stars.
Nice for the president to chime in.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Anonymous here wrote a glowing review in almost haiku form, saying, "Game is brilliant. Not for action people though, only for patient people who enjoy good story. Lots of funny characters, plenty of paperwork, lots of decisions to make, almost RPG-like. Pay rent, keep family alive, stop terrorist attacks, all good. Glory to Ostolska, 9 stars.
Well, clearly there's quite a bit of love for simulated paperwork out there. On that note, though, we're out of time for this week. Of course, if you'd like to ask us a question, then you can go here and send it in via the Ask Good Game form.
Yes, and while you're there, you can also leave a review of your own. Now back to the studio, Hex.
Good idea. The classic first-person stealth series Thief has had a reboot, with this new Thief being the 4th game since the 1998 original. Like other iconic character-driven franchises such as Tomb Raider with Lara Croft, we were excited to see how Garrett would be reimagined.
Garrett is one of my all-time favourite video game characters, and I loved how tough those original games were too. You had to rely on the shadows and really figure out how to be as stealthy as possible through some very tough scenarios. But almost immediately, this reboot wasn't what I expected.
I had a feeling you might say that. I'm a newcomer to this franchise, and being a lover of stealth and climbing, as well as tough but brooding protagonists, this game is right up my alley.
After being away from his hometown, the city, for some time, Garrett returns to find it being ruled over by a tyrant called the Baron, who only caters to the needs of the rich. Meanwhile, the poor are overtaken with a plague known as the Gloom.
The first-person perspective lends itself perfectly to the movement system they've devised for this game. Everything just feels really fluid and just a joy to navigate. We reviewed this on PC, but I should say that I played with the controller hooked up and that felt much better.
Yeah, the keyboard controls felt a little awkward and took me ages to get used to. I love that sway he does when he runs though. It's very subtle, but just perfect. But my favourite move is that swoop where he can move from shadow to shadow. It's a great way to move through small patches of light.
Yeah, stealth is always your #1 objective. And as you enter buildings, alleyways, ruins and mansions, you'll find the environment littered with noisy dangers to avoid. Broken glass.
The city will begin again, brother.
Noisy caged birds. Oh, shut up. Even traps.
You're led through the entire game with an objective marker on your screen. You've also got your magical thief focus vision, which lets you know where all of your danger zones are. This is where the game became really frustrating for me, because it just loves to babysit you. It's not the thief that I remember.
Well, it's such a common device now. It's a mechanic that's included for efficiency. I mean, I think it's fair to say that some gamers would lose patience if half the game was about searching every little nook and cranny for one item.
Trying to get away, are you? Hey!
There is combat in this game, but it's fairly basic strike and dodge stuff and designed to be avoided, which is fair enough. You're a thief, not a ninja.
Yeah, Garrett isn't meant to be a fighter. The first 2 hours of the game pretty much felt like just looting. I know you're a thief, and that's what thieves do, steal stuff, but this got pretty tedious. I also felt there were a lot of those moments where control was taken away from you to play out an animation when stealing, and it's not heaps, but it's just a little bit too much happening in this game.
Really? No, I don't mind that at all, especially in first-person games. You know, I like to see my hands out there and doing stuff.
I like seeing the hands too. I just think he does it too slowly. He's a master thief. Grab it and
He's
go.
gotta be stealthy about it. He can't just be banging and crashing through cupboards and drawers. No, I really liked that detail. I thought it was really polished. I did find it interesting though that you're pretty much kitted out with all of your gadgets from within an hour of play. There's maybe one or two inconsequential items you pick up later, but there's no real drip feed of gear.
Yeah, I almost felt overwhelmed with all the different arrows and items I had on me at the start, but without as many opportunities to use them as I would like. I used water arrows a lot.
Yeah, me too. They're pretty much all I used actually.
I know I've been pretty negative on this game, Hex, but it does get better the further you play through. There are some interesting puzzles and a cool mansion you break into, which at least in some ways harkens back to the earlier games. You have a number of guards blocking the entrance to the building, and you have to find a way in. And there's lots of perils like guard dogs and flickering light patches waiting to expose you. The whole game should have been like that.
Yeah, I like that chapter a lot. In fact, I played through it a few times just because I thought I could do it a little bit better.
I like that it took a survival horror turn halfway through, which is another nod to the originals.
Bard. Were they trying to keep something out or in?
So what did you think of this reboot overall, Hex?
Well, that's just it. It wasn't really a reboot to me as I was coming to this franchise fresh. And while I did start to enjoy it, once the story picked up a little bit, it just wasn't anything new or surprising to me. So I gave it 7.
The bottom line for me is it didn't capture that magic of the original Thief games, and I didn't feel much like a thief, so I gave it 6. Well, that's all the time we have for this week, but don't forget you can tune into regular episodes of Good Game 8:30 p.m. on Tuesday nights on ABC2.
Next week on the show, we'll be sinking our teeth into Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2.
I am the dark shadow that chills the hearts of men.
I was such a big fan of the first Lords of Shadow. I think it was totally underrated, and this one is pretty fun so far.
Well, we'll find out for sure next week. Until next time, Hex out.
Bajo out.